Welcome to Session 4 of the JA Success Skills Program. As a reminder, we are using the adapted outline provided from JA of South Dakota instead of the guide for volunteers that is in the packet. Today's activity is all about cooperation and how important it is to have cooperation while in the workplace. What you want to do for this activity is there's a couple options for today's event. You can use the activity with the puzzles, which is found on page 29 of the guide for volunteers that's in the kit. If you'd like to use the puzzle activity, please feel free to do so. However, one way we would like to suggest changing that for the speech classes that you might be working with is to use what we call a warp speed activity. If you do the warp speed activity as outlined in the adapted guide, you would want to make sure that you have a couple of soft or foam balls as well as a timing device to bring into your classroom. You're also going to use the Cooperate poster for this session and the student workbooks and table tents as you have in the past sessions. There's a lot of flexibility in this activity in which you can use the puzzle activity, the warp speed activity. You can also use the human nod activity. You can talk about leadership styles, and you can also talk about email etiquette and how that helps with cooperation in the workplace. All of those ideas are found on page 21 of the adapted outline. Today we are going to kind of walk through the warp speed activity. So as you first get into the classroom, be sure to start a conversation about teamwork. What does that look like for the students and what have they experienced? How have they experienced teamwork and cooperation in the sporting events they've been participating in, or possibly in group work that they have done for classes? There's lots of different examples that the students will specifically be able to relate to with teamwork. On page 22, you can find the success skills of the day, which is to guide others and to cooperate with others. Again, there's some discussion questions that you can use on that page. To further brainstorm about the importance of cooperating and to really get the students thinking about the importance of this in their futures, you want to use page 16 of the student workbook to get the students to brainstorm in small groups. So basically what you want to do is you want the students to break up into small groups to work together to choose one of the 3 case studies to talk about what their role would be in these case studies and how it relates to cooperating in the workplace. So what you want to do is just to have the students get into some small groups, assign them or allow them to choose one of the case studies, give them a few minutes to brainstorm in small groups, and then have them come back together as a whole class, and they would be able to share a little bit about what they thought of in their small groups with the whole class, and that can continue to foster the conversation about the importance of cooperation. For the warp speed activity, you can find the instructions outlined on page 23 of the adapted outline. Basically what you're going to do is you're going to have your class form 2 separate groups. Within that group, you want one group to just model what you're going to be doing while the other group just watches for the moment. What you're going to do is, first of all, have the students form a circle. Within that circle, you're going to give one of the students a small foam ball or some sort of ball that you have that they can use. And they are going to set a pattern of names. So for example, if I'm starting, I would go from me to John, and John would go to Susie, and then Susie would go to Spencer. And what you want to do is make sure that they remember the order in which they're going to toss the ball. So for example, I am always going to be throwing my ball to John, and he's always going to be throwing his ball to Susie. Okay, that's the first step. The goal of this activity is to see how quickly the students can send this ball from start to finish through the system. The only major stipulation is that they must pass, that the ball must pass through the system in the same order that they had already established. That's the key to the entire activity. Once you have demonstrated these steps, what you want to do is then have both groups start to play the game. It always works well if you have the teacher focusing on one group while you're focusing on the other. What you want to do is you want to time their first attempt and maybe write it on the board what that time was. And then what we want you to do is to simply prompt them, I think you can do better. And so we want them to have the opportunity to try to brainstorm of how they can work together to pass the ball through the system in a faster manner. They're going to maybe go 3 or 4 or 5 different times, who knows. And at some point they're usually going to ask, well, how fast can it be done? And we have found that you can get it done in less than 1 second. So usually what the students will begin to discover is that they can start brainstorming the fact that they can move. They could move closer together. They could move out of the circle format. You never had said that they couldn't do that. It just has to pass through the system in the same manner. So as long as the ball touches a person's hand in that same Risa to Johnny to Susie to Spencer manner, it's okay. So we have found that the fastest way of doing it, that we have found, there could be other ways, but is to actually drop the ball down so that it touches the hands of everybody in a specific order from top to bottom. And so that's, again, just one way of how to work together to bring that together. So the concept is cooperation, and so what you will naturally find when you're doing this activity is you're going to have some natural leaders, you're going to have some people that begin getting frustrated, you might have people that aren't necessarily listening to one another. So it's a great way to facilitate a discussion about cooperation. So after you have the teams kind of see the fastest way they can do it, clearly if you have 2 groups, they're going to be kind of naturally competing with one another to find that fastest time. And once you have reached that, or if they can't find the solution of getting less than a second, you could also kind of share that with them as an option. But there are some debriefing questions on page 24 of the adapted guide. These are some great ways to continue to facilitate discussion to really bring out the enhancements of that specific activity. Following the warp speed activity and your discussion, you can wrap up today's lesson by having the students do the self-assessment, which is found on page 17. Again, you want to make sure that you take the last few minutes to summarize and review everything that you've learned today and just the importance of cooperation in the workplace. Enjoy this session.